Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. My name is Nick Howell. You are watching NetApp on air. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am very excited about today's show. But first, before we get into that, a little bit of housekeeping, a little bit of business. Are you in our Discord yet? Have you joined the community? If you haven't, come join us, discord.gg/NetApp, or you can find our landing page over at netappdiscord.com. And of course, you want to make sure you're subscribed. If you're watching here on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn your notifications on, because we do this every single week on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, all around the world. You can watch it. Plus, they're immediately available on demand after the fact in case you miss it, in case you can't catch it. We have lots of people that catch up with it and leave us notes and comments and stuff saying they enjoyed the show, but we would love to have you here live every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific. Follow us on all the socials. You guys know it's 2023. You guys know how to follow stuff on social media if you want to do that. But make sure you follow us everywhere we are. But yeah, most importantly, come get in Discord, because that's where we would really love to have you guys. Tons of conversations, over 100 members of technical, executive, and support staff in there to answer any questions you might have, all of that good stuff. But let's get on with the show, because I'm so excited with this one. I'm rattled today. I apologize if there's extra noise going on back there today, because I've been busy over the last few days. You can probably see a few more blinky lights going on back there. But yeah, there's been some updates to Data Center Dude's Data Center. So if you're keeping up over on my personal channel, that is absolutely the place to see what's been going on over there. My guest today joined us back at Insight. He is a peer of mine, a teammate of mine, and he and I go back a long time. And when I first came back to NetApp back in 2018, one of the first things that I worked on was Azure NetApp Files. And this man was working on it as well. But I'm doing something different, and he's doing something different now. And he's going to talk about some really cool stuff today. So I'm going to bring him on stream, Mr. Will Stowe. Will, how you doing, sir?
I am doing well. Good to see you as always, Nick.
You too, man. I'm excited to talk about this one specifically with you for a lot of reasons. But I wanted to talk about the team that we're on, mutually on, and what we do and all of that kind of stuff. Because I don't feel like we talk about it enough. Kind of like the Navy doesn't talk about the SEALs that much. I feel like we're a bit of a special forces kind of team that does these kinds of side projects, and these side projects is probably dumbing it down too much. We do these really specialized, advanced sort of things. And you did one around our topic that we're talking about today a couple of years ago, and I don't know that I even know how long you were working on that until we started talking about it internally. So can you give us some background from where did the interest start with when it comes to Instaclustr?
Yeah, maybe Skunkworks is one way to describe the efforts, right, of NetApp moving in this direction. So I started working on some of the initial offering around Instaclustr as a company, doing some partnerships and some alignments, some ISV work, probably fall of 2021. So it goes back a good bit. And it moved from that into a kind of a bold decision from leadership to give them all the credit in the world here of helping NetApp broaden its horizons in terms of how we're looking at data. The overarching philosophy on this was, we have a great, community, user-based customers that we talk to and work with and help solve problems for at a specific level in terms of how data is viewed. But if you start going further up the stack, if you will, talking to data scientists, to developers, to other people that are working a bit closer to the code, there were a lot of synergy in terms of things like data storage system. We think of our NetApp arrays, our NetApp technology, and those folks are thinking more like database and other types of things. And that was really the crux of the argument of like, well, maybe we should do more in this space.
Yeah, it's almost a step or two up the stack a little bit. It's databases tend to be, I see them as foundational, but for applications, normally you need something that's foundational for the databases to run on. So the idea of abstracting something as foundational as a database was always kind of made me raise an eyebrow because there's databases have always been the stalwart, and they've needed stalwart storage to be able to run and have the uptime that they need in order to facilitate all of the operations that happen above them. So yeah, that was the thing that originally intrigued me about Instaclustr, was that they figured out how to do what you were just describing. Take and abstract it away and make it a bit of a managed service. Is that a fair description of it? Is that what it is?
Yeah, in many ways it is. So I think Instaclustr is one of their three pillars that make up Instaclustr. One is a managed platform for open source data oriented solutions. You could think of database as a service as be one way to describe that. Things like Apache Cassandra or Postgres SQL, Postgres, and other things like that. We want to provide these services that are fully available to anyone. You can do a Docker pull on the image or a Docker run on that and pull down the latest version of really any of these solutions that we're talking about here. But that's not the entire story, right? There's a lot that goes into managing these things, even in a basic development environment. Never mind trying to give firm SLAs around production support, upgrades, those kind of things. That experience. The second piece would be around support, right? There are a lot of customers who are running these open source type of solutions and a wide variety of endpoints that may not be Instaclustr, and Instaclustr still provides support for those customers. The last piece would be consulting. So for customers who are looking to do a migration from maybe one of the larger paid for relational database services that are out there that have billions of dollars of revenue, as customers are looking to diversify those workloads maybe on tier 2 or tier 3 data sources. They're getting away from that and trying to lower their costs, but they need help with that migration. They need help with that the day-to-day or certain key projects. Instaclustr can step in there and help those customers too. So, when you look at all three of those things, it comes back to just a very keen understanding of open source technology, data oriented technologies, and how to get the most value out of those.
So I love that. This is going to be a learning journey for me as well. I know you presented a lot of this stuff back at Insight. You had a session there. And you've been doing this in EBCs for a year or so, as far as I know. But if I'm being completely transparent here, I'm still learning. I was never a database guy. Like, if you drop me into a SQL client, I can probably hack my way through, merging a set of tables or something like that, doing some join statements. Like, I can get about that far before I just throw my hands up and I walk away. I've never been a database guy. I've always been more of a server systems kind of guy. But I'm fascinated by the idea of the prospect of what Instaclustr can do. So, who would be the people that you think would cater to? How best would you describe the audience that should be looking at something like this if they're not already?
So I think probably the first step kind of up the ladder from our traditional buyer would be like the SRE. They used to be known as sysadmins. I think I was a sysadmin for many a year, and I think that there's a lot of interchangeability between those titles. But let's use the SRE for now. That type of operator that is managing infrastructure, networking, security, applications, stacks. Right, they're managing stacks on behalf of a development team, QA team, those kind of things.
Wait. I'm running a container stack back here using a Docker Compose file. Does that make me an SRE now?
You are welcome to the SRE club, my friend. You are there. Yep.
What?
Yep. We're passing out badges after this live stream, so don't drop off. So yeah, that would be a target audience for this, where they have the need for data being moved around, data being stored. So things like event-driven architectures, things like where Apache Kafka really comes into play, where like I have things that are generating data over here, and I need to be able to collect that reliably, store that for a period of time, and then send that down the road to other consumers. An SRE is going to have that as a daily challenge, right? They're standing up new services, new workloads, those kind of things. they're going to be looking at ways to do that at scale. Moving further up the stack, we have plenty of customers who are developers or who are data scientists, who are MLOps folks, who are working with varying degrees of these experiences, and for a variety of reasons we'll touch on here in a minute, they're looking at an open source solution that can solve their problem, and Instaclustr can step in there very quickly and be there as a platform, or for consultative efforts, or for implementation efforts as well.
Fantastic. Oh, so they kind of have a services arm to be able to do some of the. Would you qualify that as PS? Does it fall into that category?
I would call it consulting, right? Okay. So we have support and consulting in the platform, where the consulting can be, like a statement of work to help you migrate, say, from a Microsoft SQL Server relational database to Postgres, or helping you move some legacy type environments over to a more modern type of engineered solution around modern data streaming services, those kind of things. But everything kind of in that facet. The short answer is, give us a ring or hit us up at Instaclustr.com and we'll take it from there. That would be really the closing answer there for how to take that. But yeah, there's all of that would be part of that in terms of offerings.
The last thing I want to ask you before we get into like the demo and the overview and everything, on a personal level, I've had a lot of like personal reward with a lot of the finding my way through the open source community over the last 3-4 years as I've been more and more exposed to it. Like, what has, first of all, I'd love to know, like, what was your level of exposure to kind of the open source community at large before Instaclustr, and like over the last 2 years as you've been doing the diligence and the onboarding work, like what has your exposure to the open source community been like, and where does Instaclustr really fit and play into that?
Well, so dating myself here, I'm old enough to say that my first experience with Linux was buying a Red Hat CD for like 50 cents out of the spare parts bin at Best Buy, and then taking it home and installing it on a Packard Bell.
I got mine out of the big administering Linux books. We remember those.
There you go. Yeah, right. Exactly.
2001, something like that.
CDs. Yeah, circa 2001, exactly.
Right.
So like Linux 2.0.
Remember bookstores?
Yeah, right. Barnes and Noble used to be a thing. So I've been around it for a long part of my career. My sysadmin days when I was cutting my teeth on this stuff was largely around either Microsoft or Linux, because that's what the environments that I supported at the time. That's what they were. They were pretty much a 50-50 split, heterogeneous between the two. And there was also some like traditional like DEC in there and some other stuff like that. But we'll leave the dead soldier prompt for the Wayback Machine. I think that my experience, it started there, and I've stayed with Linux off and on throughout the years. Everything from running it on my desktop and laptops and stuff like that to where we are today. And I think when I think of what we do at NetApp, right, the fact that we are no stranger to open source by any means. No. NFS has been around in the open source community for as long as I can remember, and probably way before that, right? And we are a premier provider.
Almost as long as Unix has been around, I believe.
Yeah. Shared file systems are a thing. And I think that, I think the reality is NetApp stepping into this space, and for myself, speaking for myself here, the move up the stack to find ways to integrate these open source solutions either with our portfolio or work alongside them in more interesting ways was incredibly exciting, and certainly a challenge. I make no bones about it. I'm still learning this stuff. The Instaclustr folks we have as part of the Instaclustr family are extremely well versed in these things, and they do an amazing job, and they're much better at showing these things off than I am. So I will do my best to do them justice. But the reality is that NetApp moving into this space, I think it reinforces what we think in terms of how data management is constantly evolving and getting closer to where really the innovation is, which is in the open source space. Basically, everything in public cloud is based on open source across all of the providers. So us moving in that direction, I think, just reinforces that.
I think I've always been a little scared of it, if I'm being completely honest. I've always needed a support contract and a bat phone. Like, I've always, call it a warm, fuzzy, sleep well at night kind of feeling. Like there's always been, especially on my part, a bit of an aversion of adopting stuff like that in production, at least. Like certain tools and scripts. Like I was all over like VB scripting in the early 2000s. There was a whole community of people in IRC that would hang out and do basically VB scripting, right? Right. Eventually we had forums and all of that stuff. So that was my exposure to it initially. I was always scared to use the application stuff because there was no bat phone. There was no support contract. There was no person whose job depended on fixing your problem, right? And that was one of my... And then Red Hat came along, and they started building in support contracts into open source Linux, right? Their own flavor of Linux. Yep. And that really kind of kicked off that cascade. So we've gotten to a point now, 20 years later, where it is not uncommon for entire companies to be run on open source software with support contracts, with third parties, with VARs, things like that. And I look at Instaclustr, and one of the things I always raised an eyebrow about was that is there anything that's not open source that's in Instaclustr? Is there any like proprietary IP there? No? Okay.
As far as the service is concerned, of everything customer facing, everything is fully open source. And to your point, right, part of what Instaclustr provides is for those customers, just as you mentioned, who may have trepidation around moving to open source. That's part of the beauty of those three pillars, right? We have that platform, so you don't have to build it, run it, maintain it on your own with a bunch of the top shelf turbo nerds, if you will, that you're praying don't leave the company. Yeah. You can hedge your bets in a lot of ways using Instaclustr as a way that you have those highly skilled engineers at your fingertips that you can call on to help you with implementation, with support, with ongoing maintenance, those kind of things, so that you are augmenting what you already have, in terms of your skill set. Or maybe even lifting all the boats in the harbor, where you're making that big shift to open source, but you have talented people, but they're still ramping up. Use Instaclustr to backstop that effort, so that you have the insurances, the SLAs, the reliability of making that jump into open source.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to go over that stuff first before we put our propeller hats on and dive deep down the rabbit hole of what this kind of stuff can do. I'm happy that we got that idea. Ironically, what a metaphor. You've kind of got a propeller hat on yourself. I don't know if you see that with the fan going. I kind of got one over here.
Right there. There we go. Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm going to pull your screen share up here, and if you don't mind, I would start this as like I've never seen it before. Take me through Instaclustr, through the portfolio, through the application, the stack, everything that it does, and let me see, as if I've never seen it before, what Instaclustr is all about.
Sure thing. Okay, let me flip to my tab. A quick check here. Everything's still on the screen okay, Nick? We're still looking good?
Okay, looks great.
Perfect. Okay. So I think the best place to start is just clicking on, once you have logged into the console here, you create an account, you can get started with, no costs up front, no credit card fees or anything like that. So you can create an account on here in a few seconds, and you're going to land on this page. You're not going to have the clusters quite yet, but you'll create an account and you'll be up and running in just a short amount of time. The next thing you want to do is click on the Create Cluster icon here. And this is going to land you in really the heart of the service here, of the managed platform of what we offer as a managed service today. So we can give our cluster here a name, call it Foo3. And we can see we have everything from Apache Cassandra, which is going to be your NoSQL distributed database solution, Apache Kafka, OpenSearch, Redis, lots of services here that you can use for a wide variety of solutions. Everything from acquisition of data, processing of data, storage of data, searching against data sets, those kind of things. So the idea here is that we have a best of breed open source solution for the large steps along with the way as your data is generated and gathered, acquired, and then distributed inside of your environment to either real-time processing with, say, something like Apache Spark, batch, getting more data out of that stream, to storing that data in a NoSQL or SQL type of database or solution, relational, non-relational, I should say, where Postgres is going to be your relational equivalent of things like Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, those kind of things. From there, I can go down the stack and figure out, which type of deployment is best for me, right? Am I going to be in, one or more of the hyperscalers, or do I want to deploy this in my data center today? That's grayed out in my example here, but this is something that we can very quickly onboard for you as a customer, so that you can use the Instaclustr managed platform to manage, deploy, and maintain these types of solutions in your data center. So, again,
is there an expectation of understanding what Cassandra, Kafka, OpenSearch, and all of these different things do? Is there kind of a built-in expectation there that what these things are and why you would want to use them?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think really ideally here, we're the target customer is going to have a basic understanding of where these open source solutions fit. So there's a lot of things that we have on the Instaclustr website in terms of primers for what these solutions do. So if you're new to open source and you're looking for more information, we have a slew of that out there on instaclustr.com. You can start looking at that to get a feel for that. But yeah, I mean, when you get to this part of the experience, it is sort of tailored for the idea that, I'm looking for Cassandra, and I want to be able to deploy it very quickly. So that is sort of the entry gate to these solutions.
Yeah, I'm not even sure. I know Kafka, and I know Cassandra, and I know OpenSearch. I'm not even sure I know what Cadence is, to be honest.
Yeah,
so
right.
I think there's a level of expertise to this that makes it kind of unique, that I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, and some of these solutions, I would say, looking at what we have with the traditional NetApp portfolio in terms of data storage and data management, things like Apache Cassandra, like where I'm storing data across one or more regions for an extended period of time. I want to be able to, get access to that data, future queries, those kind of things. Or be able to take in data for new transactions, those kind of operations. Postgres, Redis. These things are going to be very akin to things we talk about from a traditional NetApp portfolio perspective in terms of data storage. As you get away from that, things like Kafka are similar, but they're a bit more abstracted. When you get to Cadence, it's extremely abstracted, where you're looking at the ability to provide stateful operations across distributed compute or functions or operations inside of a larger workflow. So Cadence is one of our newer offerings in the portfolio, and it is definitely kind of at the further end of that pendulum in terms of like the getting started piece. You usually kind of have to know you need that for it to make sense, but it provides, like everything inside here, provides immense value to the customer.
Awesome.
So as we work our way down the provider list here, we can see there are different enterprise features that you can enable depending on your needs. You can set different SLAs for your deployment. So if you're looking to just get started, select non-production here. Is going to the workflow will guide you towards the SKUs and the compute nodes and the cost model that is more appropriate for testing the service, maybe development efforts, those kind of things, where I may not need the fastest compute operations for a service. We're going to kind of steer you in that direction.
Well, what are the implications of production versus non-production? What are the underpinnings there? Are we talking about multiple different instances getting spun up in the cloud? Is it going to affect my billing? Like what? Because I feel like little decisions like that without context can really catch people off guard. So what are the implications of the production versus non-production there?
Yeah, so in this case here, it really comes down to the SLA, right? So of the billing model, there are going to be certain features that they're enabled for production that are not enabled for production, and the costs reflect that. But in terms of like let's say you want to deploy a database, and I'll show this as we go through the demo here. you can choose production size nodes for your compute workloads that are in the non-production SLA tier, right? So you can adjust as you need to, but it really comes down to like if there's an error that's identified, detected by Instaclustr SRE engineering staff, like what type of response are you looking to get for that? If it's non-production, you lower that down and the bill reflects that. If production, you're going to expect a remediation much faster as part of that experience.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, so as we drill down further here, we'll go to the next screen. We can see we have traditionally with all of these services, there's going to be some customers who are going to be on one major release or a very popular minor release that we will maintain as part of that experience. These are going to be when you see new versions of open source solutions come out all the time. The release cadence is extremely fast across many of these solutions. And what we typically do is we will bring in that new major release, do extensive testing, validation, those kind of things against those. We're using trusted sources, so we're not pulling from the shadiest of the shadiest on the internet in terms of
you're not pulling from Nick's private GitHub repo.
Yeah, we're not pulling from Nick's registry. We're pulling from much more secure location. We validate that, make sure everything is secure, reliable, meets all of our expectations, and then we'll introduce that into the release structure so that you as a customer going from a major release or a minor release, that can be something that we work alongside you to schedule that and help you along the way. Or if you're just getting started, you want to say Apache 4, I can deploy that here and just get started greenfield if I want to. And everything we have as you go through these, again, there's the workflows are going to be similar in as much as they reflect the features for that specific solution. So like Cassandra, replication factor would be something specific to Cassandra that you can adjust here. This basically means how many copies of my data do I want inside of my cluster. Some of this stuff plays into both being part of that managed platform and also potentially consulting. Where customers are making the jump, say from a relational workflow to a non-relational workflow or a net new application, and they might need help with understanding a schema design for Cassandra, which is incredibly and critical to performance and to reliability. Where if the customer has that extensive experience and knowledge, great, go ahead and use the platform and go forth. But if you're looking for help with that, our consulting efforts can get involved, help the customer, and steer them and navigate them along the way so that they are getting the most optimal setup for what they're trying to do right out of the gate.
Got it. Love it.
Yeah. So again, there's certain things here. There's sort of quality of life, right? So here you can see my very public IP now. That you can add to your cluster firewall rule. So your basic stuff.
Please wait until after the show to DDoS Will. Thank you.
Yeah. Let that just give me a little 30 minutes and then have at it. So I can use these simple flags like this to basically enable hey, when I stand this cluster up, if it's going to be publicly facing the internet, I want to be able to connect from my Mac, right? As an example. Yeah. But I only want my Mac to connect to it and nothing else. So I can say, what? The firewall rules of your internet facing are pretty much a deny all, the de facto standards for security. And I can poke holes in that as I need to. And this is just saying, hey, your IP is this. Would you like to add that to the list? So that's one less thing you have to worry about. Once the cluster is stood up, you can just start running your SQL connections against that cluster, and you're no worse for wear.
When you talk about replication factor, if I remember right, you picked a non-production as your thing, your SLA previously, right? Explain the replication factor thing to me, because I would think that wouldn't have a higher replication factor on a non-production thing, but I'm seeing up to 5. You can have an RF5 in there. Where does that come into play? Because Cassandra, a little bit of backstory, Cassandra is one of those what we refer to as an eventually consistent database platform, if I'm not mistaken. So it will do its best to be as in sync as possible, but it's not as strict as something like an Oracle or things like that. So I look at Cassandra and I see replication factor and I go, ooh, is that multiple regions? Is that multiple clouds? Is that on-prem? Are we spanning this across? Is it all of the above? That's where my head goes. I get kind of imaginative that way.
No, you're spot on. So the answer would be yes, right? So like Cassandra has the node, the concept of a rack in a data center, where when we deploy Cassandra, by default, the first cluster we stand up here, your replication factor is set to 3. There will be 3 nodes, so you'd have if you create, do an insert on a table, you would have 3 copies of that data sharded across those 3 nodes, right? So, but I can have, less than that. I can have more than that, and this really kind of comes into, what are you trying to do? This is that consultative side of the house, right?
Start at the end and work backwards a little bit. Like, what's the finish line look like? Yeah.
Yeah, and what we can do is, with Cassandra, to your point around like, cascading multiple regions in a hyperscaler or on-prem or across multiple hyperscalers or, multi-hybrid cloud, the answer is yes. We can do all of those concurrently. So if you wanted to, you could stand up, multiple Cassandra clusters, data centers across, any topology you're really looking to do, and have that as a supported configuration of what you're trying to do. So we can support all of those.
My wheels are going.
Fantastic. And there's some enterprise add-ons. Again, these are going to be specific to the solution. So you'll see things like Apache Spark, Lucene, which is text-based searches, continuous backup as a feature for this. So this is basically us doing a continuous backup of the Cassandra solution over to object storage and having that available for you at the ready, so you can have that to restore table spaces back if you have the need to, right?
Now, are we just storing online redo logs somewhere in a bucket, or like is this an actual NetApp technology snapshot under the covers that's getting chunked and stuck into object storage?
Not yet, but we'll get to that here in just a minute. So okay. we'll pause on that. We'll save that question for just a moment.
Okay.
The last thing here it will show is simply just the data center option, or how do I want to deploy this, right? So with Instaclustr, I have the ability to deploy both, in what we would call run in Instaclustr's accounts, meaning run in Instaclustr's AWS account, or the Azure account that we manage, or the Google account that we manage, or, more times than not, what we see customers gravitate towards is, I want to run this in my own account, and I'm going to create, an IAM role that Instaclustr can use on my behalf, that has least privileges available, those kind of things, so that we're meeting all the auditing requirements and the like. I want to be able to deploy in my own account. So this is where, if I look in my provider account here, you'll see there's 2 options. You'll see our team name here, the Cloud Heroes, which would be deploying inside of our AWS account, or I can choose the Instaclustr account. All right, so depending on what my needs are. And we have customers that you go one way and or the other way, depending on billing, depending on security. Some customers do a combination of both. They're perfectly fine.
Now, is that a difference between the managed service and DIYing it?
I think from the managed service perspective, it just speaks to the flexibility, I think, of what you're trying to accomplish. Because there are many customers who get started with this who may not have access to their corporate cloud accounts, right? Where they may have had access to it at one point in time, but they no longer have access to it, and they still have a need to do maybe some testing and development, kind of that skunkworks type of shadow IT. I don't want to. It's kind of a dirty word there, but that is a thing, and there's a need for that for a variety of needs or for customers. And this is where you could deploy an Instaclustr's account just to get started for nothing else, right? As one scenario. I just want to fire this thing up. I want to throw some queries against it. I want to try to beat it up and just see what I can see before I go through the effort of trying to onboard it into my own account. So that would be one scenario, right?
Yeah. Get in, kick the tires, turn the knobs, see what happens, see how it works. Yeah.
Yeah, spot on. I can choose which region I want to deploy in. So again, across all 3 of the hyperscalers, the question really comes down to, where do you want it? And the answer is, we can deploy there, right? I can give it some basic, friendly names for what I want to call my data center. This is basically the defaulting to a standard name, but I call it whatever I want to call it. Address space, and then I can choose node sizes. So this is where I can go through and choose how much horsepower do I need for my solution. And again, this gets back into the, I may have a really good idea of what I need because I might be running Cassandra, managed Cassandra, and another hyperscaler are running it on my own and infrastructure as a service in the cloud or in my core data center, or I may need help with this as part of some guidance. The great answer here is that you can get started with a size and then resize in just a few minutes, and there's no data loss, there's no downtime, nothing like that. So there's really very little penalty in terms of kind of guessing wrong. It's not really a problem. You'll see in this case here, we're landing on Graviton-based nodes on our first options here that you can pick from. And we also have some other node sizes you can select from as well. But really the crux of this is, you can get started small and increase it as you need to. You can grow into a solution. You don't have to oversize the thing to death and just hope and pray that, the workload kind of comes to it, build it, and it will come kind of a thing. You can start small and then ramp it up as you need to.
Yeah, let the demand drive the need, yeah.
Exactly. And then the last page here is really just your pre-flight checklist, if you will, just validating what you have gone through in that setup and showing that as part of the process. There's very black and white in terms of the cost here for the nodes themselves. So you're paying for the storage, you're paying for the compute inside of wherever this is running. So you're still paying your cloud bill, and then there's the management overhead fee that we as Instaclustr take in for managing the service, and that's going to be part of your entire bill. Once you hit the I accept the T's and C's here and hit create cluster, and it's going to spin that up for you, right? So This will take 15, 20 minutes or so to spin one of these up.
Well, it's provisioning resources in AWS, so it's automating all of the stand-up of all the Graviton instances you were referring to, and like that stuff doesn't happen instantly.
Exactly. This is probably a good time to point out, right? I probably hear the questions now of, well, I can do all this in Amazon today, or Azure, or Google, or on my own. I think that the value that Instaclustr provides is first and foremost a focus on open source technology, meaning that not everything that says open source is truly open source. There's this concept of what is called open core, which is like sort of the kernel of it is open source, but there's a lot of levels of abstraction of proprietary services that are built into that. Layers, where you moving your data in or out of that solution may be untenable because there's so many hooks and tentacles, if you will, into that, where that data movement or that going from one service to another really isn't palatable. Instaclustr prides itself on the ability to be truly open source. So you can, if you don't like the service, but you like your data, you're free to take the backup and restore it wherever you want to put it, right? We're pretty confident you're going to like it, but that's one piece. It was the open source piece. The other piece is that many of the native solutions, and this is not to disparage anyone here, but just sort of calling it what it is that in many cases what we've seen from customers is that they're looking for additional functionality, additional tweaks, configuration changes, or more of a white glove experience with that service in terms of the support, monitoring, and implementation. Kind of getting back to the Instaclustr's three pillars of the service, and they're looking for that type of an experience with their open source application set. So when you kind of work down the funnel, that type of experience is not provided natively by any of the hyperscalers. They're operators. They're providing a service that's built to a spec, and if you have problems with that, then you're welcome to fix it on your own or call a partner or put in a ticket. And that's sort of what they offer. Again, not to disparage that. It works for a lot of people, but for the customers who are looking for a bit more of a tailored solution, Instaclustr really fits the bill, and that perfect kind of middle road between managing it on your own and all the pain and ill that comes from that versus running it natively. This is that third lane where Instaclustr really thrives.
It's funny you said pain, because I come from a world of Microsoft SQL, large Microsoft SQL instances running Dynamics and hundreds of databases and large Oracle instances and things like that from like the healthcare world and whatnot. Millions and millions of dollars spent procuring licensing and maintaining those instances. So many, the lion's share of headcount in our IT department was developers and DBAs maintaining those systems and keeping all of that stuff online. I look at this and I go, holy crap, in 10 minutes you just provisioned basically a 3 RF3 database instance that could be spanned across regions, and I have a bat phone I can call.
Yep.
For $1,200 a month, I think is what I saw the number would.
Yeah.
What? We managed millions of dollars of Oracle licensing every year, and I'm sitting there going, okay.
Yeah.
So where I'm going with this is like we are in the middle. We're in a gray area of there's a big transition happening in the industry right now. There's the left side that is very comfortable in their virtualized environment. Everything's working fine. They don't need to shift, and there might be a DBA or a devs in there somewhere that's kind of trying to pull them along to the cloud. But on the other side, we've kind of got this open source developer DevOps focused side of the community as well that is taking this stuff and running with it. And so how do we bring along the people that are comfortable right now, that are dealing with those contracts, that are maybe having some budget cuts and whatnot, that are potentially looking at a solution, like a managed solution like this in the cloud?
Yep. I think, everyone sees the writing on the wall. Just watch the news that everyone the budgets are getting tighter and tighter by the day. And I think this is really the grand opportunity for customers to look at open source, broadly speaking, to solve a wide variety of challenges. Instaclustr specifically, when you look at customers that are managing, very large and complex relational databases, or they're working with some of the open core vendors around non-relational or data processing, those kind of things, when you look at the Instaclustr value prop, very clearly it's fully open source. There's no licensing involved whatsoever. Everything is fully open source. We're just taking the burden off of your hands of, when you kind of have that rage quit, if you will, of those large paid for solutions. I can just build this on my own. Well, you're going to run out of steam eventually, or you're going to have a lot of late nights, right? So let us take that burden off your hands and let you focus back on the business. Let your data engineers, let your data scientists, let your ML folks, let them do what they do best in terms of generating more value out of a dollar for that data set that's being managed. And let us handle the operational pieces of that to drive down the cost in your environment, to let you do more with a much smaller budget in many cases.
And there's a great comparison here as well. So if you're a DBA, you've probably there was always a very elegant handoff between systems and DBAs. There was systems would manage the storage and the servers. Maybe you had a different storage person, but okay, here's your server. We've installed Oracle on it. We've mounted all of the NFS. We've mounted all of the LUNs, everything you need. Go nuts. So I always found the sweet spot was where I'm comfortable as a systems guy until I drop into a SQL client, right?
Right.
They're comfortable as soon as they can get into a SQL client, but they don't want to do anything out before that step, right?
Yep.
That's where the sweet spot is. So I feel like this kind of gets it there. This helps fill that gap to a point where, but you don't need the systems guy anymore. You just got to pay a monthly bill, right? And so that's really what I wanted to hearken in on was like this gets you what you need to the point that you're comfortable already in that role without having to depend on IT and staff in that sense.
Yeah, I think, and I would very similar to that perspective. I think that if you have a gap in your enterprise around your SRE team or your data team, right? The beauty of Instaclustr is that we can kind of fill the gap in terms of these services for you very quickly, so that your SR team is not sitting around trying to deploy all this in side of containers and making it all work and tuning and all that stuff. It lets everyone focus on other tasks and get more value out of their time, right? These things that we do extremely well at scale across multiple hyperscalers, across multiple solutions. Offload that to Instaclustr. Let us run those solutions on your behalf. You just consume those and let you work on other projects, again, to scale what you're trying to do. These things that are repetitive, that are time consuming, offload that to Instaclustr. Let us handle that, and you go work on the net new projects.
Well, Will, I see our demo has completed here and it's up and running. We're down to our last 15 minutes, and I know you wanted to drop into a command line, into a terminal, and show us some cool stuff as part of this.
So I do. I want to actually show off one thing that we've been working on for many moons now. Very excited about it. And inside of Azure, you now have the ability to deploy one of our first solutions for Postgres on Azure NetApp Files. So Azure NetApp Files has the NetApp name in there. It's part of my pedigree here at NetApp as well, but it's actually a Microsoft product. It's an Azure native service, a storage service. And what we're working to do is across Instaclustr is to integrate the solutions you see on this screen here with what we have in our portfolio today, sort of like working on and then working with the two main things we're going after right now. The Postgres offering is the first step in that direction. It's on Azure right now. I have that cluster running currently here. And what this allows you to do is the ability from a application owner, from an SRE engineer, whatever the perspective is in terms of the need, is that you are able to deploy your managed Postgres solution in Azure, ultimately with a better Lego, right? If you think about all these solutions you're deploying in the cloud, they're just a bunch of Legos and you're assembling them and reconstructing them to solve different challenges. What we find is with Azure NetApp Files is it offers extremely high performance for a wide variety of workloads. And then when you marry that with something like Postgres, a relational database, where high transactions per second and low latency is paramount, well, you get the best of both worlds. So this is in preview now, but it allows for you to have that better Lego that you've built your Postgres solution on without having to build it on your own, manage it on your own, or really know anything about how NetApp storage works at all. You just consume the service and you get the benefits of that. We're going to be adding a lot of more, things as part of this service in terms of what ONTAP in this case, what it offers in terms of fundamental value props, so in terms of like replication, backup and recovery, cloning, as workflows that are going to be integrated into the Instaclustr console, but they're not going to be the traditional like system manager type of vibe. It's going to be honed in to the data engineer, the DBA's experience, so that they're able to take advantage of all those benefits of ONTAP, but they don't have to care about how ONTAP works. And that's really the driving force behind what we're doing here today.
Well, yeah, I mean, you just described used a great way to describe all of the cloud storage offerings that we have across the board. So I look forward to seeing that. But this is really cool. This am I right in saying that this is the first managed database solution outside of Azure itself on Azure NetApp Files?
I think it's fair to say this is the first open source managed database solution built on Azure NetApp Files.
Fair.
Yeah, I guess fair to say. Yeah.
That's really cool. I'm trying to digest like the implications of that, because sure, we can talk about Cassandra, we can talk about running it, and we can talk about doing it, but the minute you take something like Postgres and the minute you put it on something like Azure NetApp Files, where you're running on the biggest of the biggest NetApp storage, like the combination of those two together it may even be an in-place upgrade. If you took your tables and your databases and picked them up from on-prem and dropped them into this, all of a sudden you've got a massive upgrade in performance just due to the nature of the services.
Yeah, the performance, the reliability, the ongoing day-to-day operations. As we've been doing a lot of our testing, myself and my team that is working with me on this, an amazing group. What we found is that as we're doing some testing on performance and reliability and things like that with our new solution here around Postgres and Azure NetApp Files, is the SREs are actually pinging us in real time. Hey, it looks like things are getting kind of hot in terms of your queries, and you might need to consider moving to a different instance size to solve some performance issues. I mean, they find them before I do, right? So I think when you look at that overall experience of being able to just deploy this with the UI here, or by way of an API or Terraform or whatever the case might be, with the support, with the consulting. So as you're doing that migration, to your point, from say your core data center, moving some tables from a proprietary database or even Postgres on-prem, and you want to get that inside of a specific cloud, you can use Instaclustr consulting for that part as well to really bring everything home and just have everything you need in terms of making sure all the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed. So as you make that journey to open source, it's a very easy process.
In my head, I'm sitting here going, is there a before we get into the Postgres stuff or the demo, like, how do people? Is there a way to consume this on? Is there a community edition? Is there a freemium tier? Can people try this in a way that's not maybe aside from the cloud bill, obviously we all have to pay? Like, is there a way for people to try this stuff out?
Yeah, there's a 30-day free trial, so you can go to Instaclustr.com and get started in a few minutes. Fire this up and start deploying inside of a hyperscaler of your choice, and get a feel for it, and go from there.
Nice, awesome.
Yeah.
All right, let's get geeky.
So this is going to be extremely brief, but just want to kind of show you, like, when from the perspective of once I've stood up a cluster of what I'm doing to connect to that. And this is, again, very basic, but just to kind of show the workflow here. Once my cluster has been stood up, I can look at my firewall rules and make sure that my very public IP that you see here has been added to the firewall list, so that my machine at this IP is the only box that can connect to this. Now, I would say that the majority of our production customers do not have services like a database that's facing the internet, but you can if you want to, right? In terms of being able to get started within a few minutes, this is pretty much going to be the de facto standard. But as you move away from that into more secure production workloads, you're going to have everything in terms of VNet peering, private, public subnets. We support all that. It's not a problem whatsoever. But this just kind of show this in brevity of how to make this work.
So it comes with its own built-in firewall. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely it does, right? So I can look at everything from the monitoring of what's going on with my service in terms of queries that are happening, baseline performance from the application perspective, network, the compute side, storage, all that's going to show up here. I can grab this by way of things like Prometheus if I wanted to. I don't have to use this console.
That was going to be my question. Is all of this data fully extensible? Can we plug it into, can I point Uptime Kuma at it? Can I, all these other third-party open source tools? I'm assuming all that still works.
Yeah. In many cases, the answer is yes. So you can use those services to consume that by way of an API. Connecting to my cluster is very simple. I can go through here. I can find my public IPs if I'm connecting over the internet by way of the aforementioned firewall rule, or if I'm on that VNet or VPC respectively, I can connect with the private IP address with my private IP and my port number. We also pass along your credentials for that. You can find inside of this page. You can see here we have the credentials, username and password. You can remove the stored password if you want to, so that doesn't show up in terms of the records. It just goes away. So it's not something that anyone's going to have access to other than you inside the console. We also offer examples of how to connect to that database with a variety of sources. It could be CLI or Java, Python, Prometheus for monitoring, those kind of things. So in this case here, we can use this very simple psql command. You can install, if you're on a Mac, you can install psql or Postgres by way of Homebrew or Chocolatey on Windows or whatever your preferred flavor is, or apt to install if you're on Linux. But you can see here, I'm just going to go through and do that run here, connect to my instance, and do some quick look around here. I can see I'm connected to my instance. I can see my databases.
Don't forget, you got to switch your thing, Will.
Oh, sorry about that. Let me
all good.
1 second here. Let me fix that real quick. And
all good. Yeah, we were trying to figure this out before the show. The best way to do it.
Yeah, sorry about that. Let me start.
There we go.
Okay.
Now we see it.
Right, so go back to the green screen, Will. All right, so we have our psql command we saw on the Instaclustr console here. I'm doing a little bit of whiz-bangery in the back with something called pgpass, where I'm storing my password on my local machine, so I'm not having to type it in and waste a bunch of time typing in a very long password. But I can go through here and just run these commands directly from my console and start doing the just as we mentioned prior, Nick. I can get started with this directly from my Mac and start getting a feel for what's going on with the service, create some databases, create some tables, start running some queries against that, plumb in some of my test applications, and then, okay, well, my level of comfort, increases with the service. I like what I'm seeing. I can start doing the next iteration, which is I'd like to get this plumbed into our enterprise Azure subscription or our AWS account or our Google project, or I'd like to be able to deploy this on-prem inside of our own data center. The answer is we can handle all of those very quickly and easily and get you started in just a few minutes.
Awesome. I'm still trying to really wrap my head around the coolness factor of it. Obviously the coolness factor is there, but where would I have used this 15 years ago is where I always find myself going, like, where's the leap here? And I think it goes back to what I was talking about earlier. This empowers developers and DBAs, middleware developers, whatever you might be, above and beyond the dependency of your IT organization or any kind of stuff where typically you would wait in a queue around a cubicle and, please may I have some more resources. Here you go. Right now you've got kind of on-demand resources thanks to the cloud and this kind of managed interface that will help walk you through it, plus the consultative arm of Instaclustr themselves. So this is so powerful, and I feel like people are sleeping on this kind of stuff and thinking that it's danger, stranger danger to go into the open source type of stuff. But I just watching what you just did over the last hour, I'm amazed that we've come this far in technology to be able to get things to where they are today.
Absolutely. It's very exciting. We've our first offering here of the Better Together story of Postgres and Azure on Azure NetApp Files is going to be one of many, right? So there's a lot of work that's going to continue to be done there, moving it out of preview into general availability, offering more features, more functionality, really, again, tailored for that application owner, and then doing the similar thing across everything that we can with the Instaclustr open source portfolio today. Very exciting stuff.
Well, Will, thank you very much for taking us on this journey. Guys, if you have questions, come join us in Discord. Will, I'll let you go. Thank you very much for being a part of the show. We definitely will have you back in the future because I think there is a lot more to talk about when it comes to whether it's databases, Instaclustr, and like some of the stuff that we know is coming that we can't just say out loud yet that is powerful stuff. We'll definitely have a need to have you back on here at some point in the very near future. So I hope you'll sign up with us again.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for your time.
Take care, Will. Some closing thoughts from me here, guys. That is fantastic. That was the first time that I had really been through that at that level of detail in a one-on-one basis. We've been talking about Instaclustr for going on 2 years now here at NetApp, and the way that it's going to fold into other things and become sort of a natural flowing piece of the infrastructure is really a sweet spot. So big shout out to Will, my teammate, my friend, my peer, for giving the demo today and showing us around. Guys, make sure you get into Discord if you have any questions. Will does hang out in there, so if you hint, wink, wink, if you want to follow up, if you have any questions, or if you're a NetApp customer and you want to see a deeper dive demo, you can contact your account team, reach out. If you're a partner and you want to learn more about it, reach out to your partner manager team, all of that stuff there. But thanks for tuning in to NetApp on Air today. We got to get out of here and go back to work. Enough playtime. But again, every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you get into the Discord, discord.gg/NetApp. Subscribe here on YouTube. Follow us on Twitch. It's 2023. You guys know what to do with all the social media stuff at this point. So thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you guys next week. Take care.